everybody. I'm Julie D.
Hi.
I'm a professor of humanities at College of DuPage, and I'm also the global education liaison. And we're doing a series of COVID chats, COVID conversations. And I'm today with Lee Kesselman, who's a professor of music. He is also a composer. He directs several of our choirs. You can see he's directing as we speak in his background there. And Lee has been at the College of DuPage since 1981. We also have Connie Canaday Howard, who is a professor of theater at the College of DuPage. She is the managing artistic director of the Buffalo Theater Ensemble, which is our professional theater company. And Connie is both actor and director as well. And she has been at the college since 1988. And we are here to talk about COVID and the arts. So, hey, you guys, hey again.
Hi.
So one of my questions, it's that standard old question. We're in a crisis, often after natural disasters when countries have to rebuild. Money comes in from NGOs and people complain and say, why are we giving money to the arts during natural disasters? Shouldn't we be putting that money towards health and education and sanitation? The arts will happen anyway because people will just create wherever they are. Do we really need to give money to the arts? So my question to you is, during COVID, are the arts actually really relevant? And if so, how? And we're gonna start with Connie, and then Connie, you're gonna sort of let Lee, you guys can just talk about that together.
Yeah, it's a really hard question. I mean, I have been donating to all kinds of humanitarian efforts since this started, as well as artistic efforts and other social efforts. So it's a really hard question, but without trying to be flippant, I always think about Winston Churchill's quote during the World War when his advisors told him that they thought they should cut some of the arts funding that was happening during the war. And he said, then what are we fighting for? Bottom line is, it's still, even in phase 3, it's still a very serious and can be very traumatic time. This is unlike any other crisis that we have lived through in our lifetime, this pandemic. And the arts, yes, we can create, and lots of people are creating. I'm working on a show right now through Zoom, but it also is a way to celebrate and re-nourish your soul. It's a way to calm yourself and to think about things in a provocative way that maybe you haven't thought of before. I've watched theater that I never would have seen before from across the world during this time because they've allowed it to be seen.
Oh, right. So it's become more international then in that sense. You have wider access. Louis Netter in an article was talking about, he says, art is part autobiography, but it is also a way for us to reassemble our own psyches during this time. And UNESCO refers to the arts as a culture's collective resilience. And so I think that's a little bit what you're getting at. Mm-hmm. Lee, what would you like to add to that? How would you like to pursue that?
I think one of the things that's clear is that the arts have always been a part of the human being. And you go back very, very far and you see evidence that visual arts and linguistic arts and performing arts have always been a part of who we are. And that must mean that they're necessary. And that tells us something about how we use the arts. The arts tell us about ourselves. The arts help give us perspective on our lives both in society and community as well as alone. We use the arts use us. We have a way to reflect on what's going on. We do find that when there are major societal changes, we always have an artistic response to that. We usually don't see it until somewhat after the time, strangely enough. The 1920s, we saw the artistic response to World War I. The AIDS crisis, it came near the end of the sort of first immediate rash of cases and deaths and so forth. We see the arts reacting to and helping us understand. The Greeks knew that through catharsis, through seeing theater, we were able to experience things we were able to experience things on stage we didn't have to experience in real life in order to better understand ourselves, our fears, our beliefs, our joys, our celebrations. The arts are always a part of celebrations, and they're always a part of our coming to grips with the parts of being human that we're not comfortable with.
Do you think, so you talk about that response and sort of the lag time, do you think the arts are responding in real time right now to COVID? Or do you think that we're going to have to wait to see the COVID effect on the arts?
I think both. I think right now what we're seeing is arts organizations are figuring out how to reach audiences who can't come see them in person. So the Berlin Philharmonic has opened up its entire library of all their recordings from the beginning of time so that you can stream those and watch those. And Metropolitan Opera every day has a different one of their archived film recordings. So we're getting that. We know that book readership is up. We know that poetry writing is up. We know that composing is probably up. I mean, all those things indicate that there's something happening. Probably the artistic response of what composers and playwrights and novelists write, that's probably going to come a little bit later. That's my feeling anyway.
I think so too. I mean, there have been all kinds of stream things, of archive things in the past in theater as well, or in dance, or, you know, all of the performing arts. But there are things to work out in terms of new material with you know, how does it work in a virtual environment, you know, and rights, copyrights, and artist contracts, et cetera, et cetera. But as I said, I'm working with students right now on a piece that has the working title of "Every Day is a Zoom Day," and it's I mean, we're working in 3-hour rehearsals. It's really invigorating and fun, challenging too.
Does it make you more attentive or less attentive? I mean, like, does it make you, how does that change the collaborative experience?
Well, you don't have full body, so your word choice and what you do with your face and your hands becomes even more important. But it is, we're working lots of monologues, but we're also working lots of scenes, sort of the Brady Bunch intro idea, you know, right. So across, you know, and we're going to edit it. It's not going to be live, but as though it was happening live. But it is, and we've gone through several organizations already. Is this a day in the life of? Is this 3 days over a period of 6 months? Is this blah, blah, blah? But because it's improv, so we can do that. But I think it makes you more attentive. You know, when you're looking at a 3-hour rehearsal of improv, because you can rehearse 3 hours and not have anything that's usable, it becomes fodder for the next rehearsal where you get a few minutes of usable material, etc. But I was like, in Zoom, I was like, okay, am I going to have to take more breaks? Blah, 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 blah. And in actuality, it's not enough time. We could keep going,
interesting.
You know? So it's packed.
So let me suddenly, by the way, I want to make better facial expressions and use my hands more for this. So Lee, you know, the same question, or let me ask you both this, and we'll start with Lee. Are the live arts going away? Has Zoom changed the power of the arts, and are we going to just never get off our couches again because of this accessibility? Lee?
I think some of it is that we're in suspended animation. We really, there are things you can do that are electronic and at a distance, and there are things you can't do. And we are all in the arts because most of us are in the arts because we really like the things that you can only do live with audience and with co-performers and so forth. I've made one virtual choir recording of our COD chamber singers. I didn't really want to do it because they don't sing together. They sing alone and mail in their part, and then the technician puts it together. And my students were, we want a record of our year together, and we want to be able to know what we sound like and look like. And I said, you won't like it. Of course, you know, being the dad, I was sure they wouldn't like it. Well, only half of them even sent in a recording because they were so frustrated with the process. And then one girl said, I recorded mine 12 times. I never liked it. is because she didn't like singing alone, and the experience was completely different from the choral music experience of singing together. So there are things that are changing. What we do know, what we do hope for, is that we'll be back to something that approaches normal, sitting in a theater or a concert hall, watching live arts unfold. It's different for writers, it's different for painters, it's different, but in the performing arts, we really require that. We all know that watching a movie in your living room alone on the screen is different from watching one in the movie theater.
And Connie, are you echoing that, or are you, I mean, that's sort of what you're, so then let me ask you, you guys are talking from the creator's perspective. Let's talk about from the spectator
Audience
participant audit. Thanks,
Yeah.
I forgot the word audience there.
I think
perspective.
you know, I'm often an audience member myself, and I think that's why people see live performance, is because of the energy in the room between whatever the stage is and the audience. It is the piece is affected by audience reaction. And it's alive because of that audience reaction. We always say that you don't have a theater piece until you have the audience. You have a rehearsal until you have the audience. So it's too soon to say. And I do think in all aspects of our life, including the arts, post-pandemic will be the new normal. We will have evolved through this, and I think the things that are being sort of struggled with, challenged with, about how to further the art form in ways that we wouldn't have done before, I think that's healthy. So I think it will have affected that live performance in some way, and I don't even know all the ways that will happen, of course, but I do think that live performance is not going away. I think it is, honestly, I think, of course, this is coming from somebody who's made her life in it, but I think it's a need. I think it's a need of audience and those people who are working artists to congregate in that way, to grapple with, whether it's comedy or drama, to grapple with the issues what makes us human. I really, really believe that.
So let me, before Lee takes over, I used to argue with Dr. Balianitz, who used to be a professor of anthropology here, and we used to argue whether language or arts came first. And it was sort of a fun argument, and you can't really win it, but I know I was right. that it is. You can express things before you can express things verbally and linguistically, and I think that's interesting. Lee, we were asking, and so Connie, too, you're sort of saying that this COVID is pushing the boundaries of the art forms, of all art forms, to maybe places they might not have gone, or they might have gone, but we're getting there sooner and adapting. And Lee, I was wondering, what your thoughts were in terms of audience feel, or.
I think it's really necessary to the performing arts, and whether that's film or whether it's dance or music or theater or some hybrid combination, I think that is a vital part of it. I really miss being in the theater and the concert hall right now as a consumer, as a person who goes to those things. And I think when we think about all three of us are teachers, when we think about the dynamic that takes place in a classroom, as opposed to the dynamic that takes place when we're teaching online or having this conversation online, this would be a different conversation if we were all in the same room together. We would read body language. We would see nuance. We would hear nuance. We would react to each other in real time. And the arts are that, and then blown up to maybe even a much larger situation, because it involves, a product that people come and see over and over again. But we know that a play is different every night in the theater.
It's true.
And a lot of it has to do with, some of it may have to do with what the actors ate or how much sleep they got, but probably more of it has to do with who's in the room. People talk about, it was a Sunday afternoon audience. And that doesn't mean a bad thing, but it means that's different from the Saturday night audience. And musicians talk the same way, not just theater people. We talk about audiences. If I'm going to a play and I'm going to a play in Hyde Park, that on the University of Chicago campus, that is a completely different audience from any other theater audience in the city that I've experienced theater with. There are probably more Nobel Prize winners in the audience and more neighborhood people in the audience. You get both at the same time. Whereas if you go to a play at Writers Theater up in Glencoe or Buffalo Theater Ensemble, you have a different experience. Same play, could even be the same actors. So I think what some of us miss is that richness and that nuance. But at the same time, as Connie says, we're learning a lot by doing this. And the same as teachers. We're learning how to do things as teachers that maybe are more efficient and that maybe are even more effective. But we don't know what all those things are yet.
I was thinking.
I want to jump in and say one thing, Lee.
Sure.
Your choir concerts we used in our improv show as fodder for an improv. So it has probably all kinds of life that you don't even know.
Well, right. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that interplay of audience and, it's something we don't think about in terms of live performance. I think it's part of the power of it is that the audience is impacting the performance, and the performance, hopefully, of course, is impacting. And so that's one of those intangibles that has so much weight that it's hard to replicate. You guys are like so high-minded. You're like, we would be paying attention to the performance if we were live. We would be taking it. And I'm like, I would be hearing the guy crinkling the last M&M in the package trying to get it out. So that's where we're at. I read this quote on Facebook that I love. This woman who works in infectious diseases, and she said, I've prepared my whole life to study science and all these. She said, I never understood why I had to take an arts class. I never understood why I had to take an English class. And I'm a scientist, and I work every day with this pandemic. And what I find myself going to are thoughts of inequity, injustice, and the people. I do not think about, she thinks about this, the science is internalized, and so she's talking about this idea of returning to the arts, even as a scientist, and we know that more and more people are, how are they filling their time? They're turning to the arts. So I guess I was curious to know, and then I like this idea of UNESCO saying that the arts are the voice of cultural resilience. And I sort of hear you guys sort of saying that, but do you want to add other thoughts to that? Can you go ahead?
I think some of it is very hard to determine and see in the present tense. That when we look back at a year in time, and it might be 1742 or it might be 1875, we see trends that we didn't see before. When The Normal Heart came out as one of the first so-called AIDS plays, nobody knew there were going to be a lot of AIDS plays. I mean, plays about AIDS that reflected on the experience and that dealt with it from all different kinds of viewpoints and perspectives and age groups and socioeconomic groups and so forth. So we have a tendency to see these things later. We know that in the 1600s, Heinrich Schütz stopped writing pieces for big ensembles, starting writing pieces for chamber groups, because the 30 Years' War had killed 25% of the people in Europe, and there was nobody left to perform. But at the time, I don't know whether he was thinking, I'd like to reflect the disaster that just came upon Europe. He was just doing his work as a musician. So I think it's hard to say, but it would be inevitable that the experiences we've had the last few weeks or months, the pandemic, and then the Black Lives Matters issues that have come to fore, and the George Floyd murder, all of that, the Donald Trump presidency, none of that can go unnoticed or will go unnoticed. But it will take a little
that's
while.
what you're saying in terms of cultural resilience is that politicians may come and go, plagues may come and go, but what has been a constant throughout all of that is a production of the arts, both at a professional and personal level. And I think about that George Floyd. If I was I play on a trivia team, and what I did was, for the trivia questions, we're creating our own now because we can't go out, but I just found a bunch of cartoons of George Floyd and said, which country produced this? Because that, to me, is one of the things about the arts, is that all across the world, it wasn't just in the United States, all across the world, people were producing cartoons about George Floyd and the inherent racism and that sparked so much in many countries. And I just So anyway, Connie, I didn't let you weigh in on any of that, but I guess to me it's that resilience of the arts, and that the arts are not just here but everywhere, and our arts affect other countries, and other countries are affecting our production of arts as well. Connie, there's a lot there. Pick one.
I think I not pick one. I think I'll just add, but because I agree with everything that's been said, but I think that one thing that I'm finding, and I find that my current cast is finding, and my current cast is come from very different backgrounds. We have some current full-time COD students. We have somebody who has transferred on out of state and is back home and wants to be involved in a production. We have professional people who are taking the class and involved in the production. So it's a mix of individuals, and what I'm seeing a lot is the need. Part of it is this particular crisis, as opposed to, you know, a catastrophic fire or hurricane or blah, 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 blah. It is necessary to listen, to not just use your own point of view, and to the need to be heard yourself, but the need to listen and understand others. So it's increasing, at least my hope is, it's increasing not only understanding, which I think the arts help us do, but also empathy and, calls to action, which I think is really a healthy byproduct of this catastrophic time and catastrophic events. It gives me hope.
Oh, that's a nice way to sort of start winding down. But Lee, do you want to add to that? Or if not,
Well,
I've got my last question. Go ahead.
As per usual, I agree with Connie on everything that she said.
Who doesn't agree with Connie?
Yeah. But I think you're right, Connie, that the art of listening, which has been dying in political discourse the last few years, it's been a really tough 3 years or so in terms of the political discourse in Washington, in Springfield, and everywhere else about what's the right way to approach something. And no, this is what I think. I don't really care what you think. That sort of way that we've gone through some of this time. And a big emphasis of the Black Lives Matter movement is you may not actually have much to offer here. You should be listening. And so we're all being met head on with it's time to listen. It's time to listen what other people are saying. Their experience here is really important to all of us. And I think this mirrors other times and places as well. As a child of the 60s and 70s, I remember protesting in the streets. These are different protests. These are in some ways much more thought out, I might say, than maybe what we experienced. And that gives everybody an opportunity to change modality and not just information, change the way in which we communicate with each other. And like Connie, I'm hopeful that will help the discourse, and that will help move us to a different place where we're not just willing to accept, well, you know, those statues have always been there, and so they're just going to be there for the rest of time. Or that military base has been named what it's been named forever, so we're going to keep that. Or I guess inequity is just a part of our lives together. Maybe not. Maybe there's a chance here. And I think the arts help us through a lot of those things. Sometimes it's a few artists standing on the front lines, shouting things or singing things or saying things, and sometimes everybody behind them.
So it gets back to that idea of listening and listening to the arts, and I think that's kind of what you guys were talking about in terms of that exchange between audience and performers. That there's that mutual listening that's going on, and we all think listening is such a passive skill, but I think we all know that listening is quite an active skill. Let's stop there, except for me to say, how do you guys, what did I not ask you that you wanted to put out there about the arts, or is there anything that I didn't give you a chance to sort of say, or how do you want to close the discussion? We'll start with Lee and then go to Connie.
I think like Connie, I'm hopeful. I'm a little bit terrified as a choral conductor because there are health implications for what we actually do. And there's a lot of study being done. Major medical schools are putting a lot of effort into what happens in the room when people sing, and how is disease transmitted or not transmitted. And there's a lot of misunderstanding out there, and there's a lot of what, let's just say, internet chatter that really is not grounded in fact.
Have you tried singing with a mask, Lee?
Actually, I have tried singing with a mask. I've watched people sing with a mask, and I think distancing and the mask issue and just the health of people being together. People sing in choirs in order to be together doing something. And it's a communal experience that's really important. That makes choral music in particular a risky business these days. So it's being worked on. There's a lot of discussion. We're going to learn an awful lot. We've always known that when you're sitting next to someone in the choir and they're coughing through 3 hours, you'll probably get sick, just like riding in an airplane next to them. That's probably not a good thing. So, maybe we're learning some things about how we deal with that on a regular basis, not just during times of pandemic. But we will recover. Just before this pandemic started, there was a statistic that more people are singing in organized choirs in the U.S. than at any other time in our history, and not just numeric, but percentage-wise. And now, today, probably fewer people than any time in our history, percentage-wise and numerically. Church choirs and community choruses and school choirs and everything else. So
let me have you wind up. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying it's a huge shift, and I don't think we're going to lose it. I think it will be transformed, as Connie said, to a different kind of normal. We just don't know what all that means. But I am hopeful, and I'm writing all the music I possibly can because I'm sequestered in my house, and that is a good thing in some ways.
All right. We keep hearing about Shakespeare and Newton, and now we have Kesselman. Connie, did you ended with hope, and then we went on. Do you want to find some parting thoughts on this?
Well, I not really. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, but I've had some students, or former students actually too, asking me things they can do, during this time, and feeling antsy. And in addition to watching other art, I have, friends, and I've participated in a couple of Zoom scene readings, or play readings. In addition to creating your own art. And I think it's also just art comes from life. So participating in things that this time allows you time to do that maybe you wouldn't normally have. Being in nature, some of, even with the show I'm working on now, some of my suggestions that get us the farthest happen when I'm, working in the garden away from any technology completely, Right. So it's also time to regenerate and keep conversations staying open to all kinds of information and thoughts that might fuel something down the line 10 years from now, So I don't know. I just have, certainly there are times when this time can feel claustrophobic and disheartening and all kinds of things that are places that I don't want to live for very long if I can possibly do it. But I think there are all kinds of ways to turn that and to look on a forward path, So a tiny example we were talking about, because we're creating through improv, it can go in a bajillion different ways. And we were originally talking about it being when we first went on Shelter in Place, both serious things and comic things about what that meant to your psyche and to the things that you did and blah, 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 blah. And I said, but we're in a very different place now. And we'll be in a very different place in July and August. And we'll be, and we don't know exactly what that place is. But the point is, for pertinence of your audience and wanting to watch, I think we need to think about some kind of a timeline that's about moving through as opposed to being stuck.
Waiting out. I like moving through versus waiting out. Yeah, interesting. Well, let's leave it there. Now forever in my head, when I think about Lee, I'll see him sequestered in his house, and I'll see Connie acting out scenes in her garden. This will be my takeaway from this discussion. Thanks, you guys, very much.
Thank you.
Maybe down that time, maybe when we see on the other side of this, we'll come back and revisit the topic.